Thanks, Darren, and welcome everyone. We're really excited. Gordon, myself, David, this is our first webinar despite over 25 years of experience in marketing and sales in just about every dimension you can imagine. So we're really pumped for this session, and we promise to bring some energy and insight, hopefully to your businesses. To kick it off, just please let us know in the chat pane any questions that you might have, comments along the way, and we'll endeavour to answer them either at the time or certainly at the end in the Q&A. Today we're going to cover 4 main sections, and the first section will be really around using market research. Then we'll follow that up with how you might use SEO research. Then we'll look at how we immerse ourselves in the customers' lives. And finally, we'll look at how we apply it in terms of creating a customer-centric business. But before we begin, we wanted to chat a little bit about what a buyer persona actually is, and we're going to run a little poll. And I guess the question is, what is a buyer persona? And I'm going to read through these options, and those should come up in the poll. But it's A, semi-fictional representation of your ideal customer based on market research and real data. B, a demographic description of your target audience. C, a description of your target audience personality. And D, a psychological description of your buyer. So which one is it? We'll give you a little bit of time just to think that through and select an answer.
We have 100% saying a psychological description of your buyer, David.
Very interesting. Well, that's part of it, but it's not the full part of it. It is actually option A, a semi-fictional representation of your ideal customer based on market research and real data. Psychologically, that's going to come in through the market research, particularly if we're doing primary market research. But it is a semi-fictional representation because we can't know everything about everyone. We need to look at sample-based research, and we also need to look at real data and marry the two and create a picture. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So thanks for doing that. I guess before we get into it, we wanted to just talk about the mindset. It's not about us, it's about the customer. And we've got to stop talking about ourselves because in the old world, we hoped that we would broadcast our message and the customer would receive it when and where they need our product. Now, we know that that's wasteful and somewhat annoying for customers. And in today's world, we know that when we produce content, we can make it available and helpful for when and where they want it. And customer-centric content works for you 24/7. So to achieve customer centricity, we need to get to know our customer much better than we have ever before. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but it's our challenge. Taking a step back before we discuss market research, I just wanted to pose a question. Why is customer insight so crucial? Because in today's society, everything's changed. And I know that's, again, another cliche. The power's in the hands of the customer more than ever before. Customers can conduct their own research, their own reviews, their own comparisons, do whatever they need to do to form an opinion about your product before you've even spoken to them. And that leaves you open to challenging your product proposition, to disintermediation, and unfortunately no one's immune from that digital disruption. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Gordon.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just going to talk right now about how to use that market research. What market research tools can you use to get the customer insights that can be so foundational for driving your business? Because as David said, the challenge is to get customers to choose us. So for customers to choose us, we need to know as much as we possibly can about them. Why? Well, because the better we know them, the better our goods and services will be targeted towards them, the better our customer experience of our brand will be. And those things are what it really means to be customer-centric. Because they're changing so much, the more you know them, the better chance of success that you're actually going to have as a business. So there's kind of 6 broad questions that you want to ask to uncover those customer insights. They're really easy to ask and they're not always that easy to answer. So let's just go through them really quickly. Who is your customer? Who are they? So there's demographics and psychographic natures of that answer. There's job titles, and those kinds of things are really important to understand. But then you've got to ask, what do they want? What's important to them? And also what's not important to them? And it might also be, what is the table stakes in your category? So there might be some things that are important to them, but everyone does them equally well. So you need to know that as well. So you can find something which is a little bit more distinctive of where you can stand out. Why do they want what you've got to offer? What are those deep motivations that are underlying those wants that we just talked about? It could be their reputation. It could be their need to look good in front of people. Those kinds of things. Very important to understand those deeper issues. Where do they want it? Where do they want your goods and services? Where do they hear about you? Do they hear about you through word of mouth? Do they find out about you through Google search? Not everything necessarily gets found out through Google search. Word of mouth is extraordinarily powerful, as you well know. But that's important to understand. And when do they want it? Do they want it immediately? Or is what you're selling more of a considered purchase, and you really need to think about that journey that they go on to get to you? Really important basic things to understand. And lastly, how do they want it? Some people will want it, just fast and cheap. Some people will actually just want you to provide some advice and some good guidance. Other people might actually want you to hold their hand along the entire journey. And you need to know what are these basic sort of questions. So when it comes to research, there's some of the questions, but there are two broad research sources. There's primary research sources and there's secondary research sources. Secondary research sources, as you may know, that's like published industry reports or data which has been gathered from a third party. They're good and they're great, but the best insights probably come from the primary research methods. And so primary research methods can be qualitative or quantitative. Again, you may know these, but the qualitative is where you get your richness. They come from focus groups. They come from one-on-one interviews. Some of those depth interviews of talking to people in a room, or it could be on the phone or however it might be, but it's qualitative, allows you to dig a little bit deeper, get a bit grittier with them. Quantitative is the more numerate kind of research that you do. Polls, for instance, where you need good sample sizes and you might need to report metrics, or brand awareness, or those kinds of things are really, really important. Yep. All of those questions that I talked about earlier, the who, what, why, when, are really the foundations of the questions that you should be asking in the primary research phase. But I know not everyone on this webinar, and including ourselves, we're not big businesses, so we don't have thousands and hundreds of thousands of money to throw at research. So how do we get some of this primary and secondary research for businesses, perhaps like the ones that many of us are running? So you can do it yourself. You can get, as long as you can recruit some people who might be in your networks, which is really good for fresh networking, or your friendship circles. You could recruit people into a room, into your home, and have a moderated questionnaire and have your own focus group around the kinds of questions that we talked about before. So that would be really good. You could actually get together a cross-functional group of people within your own businesses to come and talk about these questions and unpack them and try and find those answers as you go through things. Or there are, in a quantitative sense, there are a company called Pure Profile, where you can have a series of questions that will go out to the customers. That they've got a big bank of people who they talk to on an ongoing basis, and you can insert your questions into those questionnaires that they've got, or even omnibus surveys that you can piggyback on as a more economical way to try and get some of those questions and answers. So you can ask them those kind of questions. You could feed them concepts or ideas or things that you're thinking about, all those kinds of things, but they will give you the quantitative answers to what you're doing. And there's SurveyMonkey, for instance, a very popular tool that's being used. But I did just want to throw to the group very briefly, in the spirit of maybe learning, I've mentioned Pure Profile, SurveyMonkey. Would anyone be willing to sort of talk about what techniques, qualitative or quantitative techniques, that you might have tried in your business or that you've come across that you've found really powerful? And anyone? Stick up your hand or unmute yourself.
I've done quite a variety of different things, but the biggest thing we did was back in November last year. I got 6 of our customers together and did a focus group, as you said there. And it's best to actually talk to your customer, because like, as much as I think I know the answers, it's really what's in it for them. So that was actually very, very effective. And then also I did a big SurveyMonkey thing in December last year as well, which came out with a lot of great insights as well, because then people can just anonymously put things down and they don't feel intimidated if they're in front of you. So yeah, very good.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great. I think the other thing just to think about, just to reinforce what Gordon said, is thinking about the role of qualitative research and the role of quantitative research. Qualitative research is all about uncovering the language, the deeper emotions, and forming a hypothesis around the answers to those 6 key questions. And then the role of quantitative research is to actually put some numbers behind that so that you can move forward with a greater degree of confidence that you've got a statistically robust sample that you can make decisions from. Right, moving on. We're going to now look at SEO research, or search engine optimization research, to answer some of the questions your customers are asking. I guess, hands up who's an SEO specialist in the room? Not me. I think the thing about this section, it's not about really the specifics of SEO, but rather some of the tools and things that you can do to get to the heart of the pain and gain points that your customers might have by understanding the questions that they ask. And I think that's the fundamental thing here. We need to understand the questions that your customers are asking. And I guess, conducting primary research studies like Gordon spoke about, surveys, interviews, can sometimes forget the fact that we're emotional creatures at heart. And so it's important to pair that research with behavioural research. In other words, what people actually do. And I found this quote from Margaret Mead. I don't know who she is, but we've heard this saying again and again and again. What people say, what people do are entirely different things. And in this case, SEO research is a great way to get the heart of what people are actually doing. So I wanted to start with Google Analytics, which most people have installed on their website. And you can do some great things with Google Analytics. And you can start with looking at user segments. So based on, for example, this example data, we can see that 8% of this fictional website visitors are identified as technophiles, individuals with a strong interest in technology. And we can see that 5% of the in-market segment are also interested in financial services. So that's really useful information when we're starting to prepare our buyer persona in terms of matching it with the primary data sources with the actual visitors to your website. We can also look at like the path to purchase, so the conversion path analysis. And what that does is understands the sequence of steps a visitor might take before converting. And a conversion might not be making a sale, it might be the fact that they've read a blog, or it might be that they've downloaded a PDF or something like that. Again, marrying that up with what they've told you will help improve the accuracy of your buyer persona. And customers don't take the path that you might think they might. They take their own paths, and it's really important to understand those paths to how they get the answer to their questions. In this case, you can see that paid search referral visits are the top performing conversion channel. So that has a lot of implications when we come to our buyer persona and building it. We've probably all heard about keyword research, and it's a fundamental for SEO, and that's probably a starting point that most SEO organisations would undertake for us. At its heart, it's really are understanding what the questions your prospects and customers have. Understanding how them unlocks how you can help them. So your primary research has unlocked some of the emotional layers, and your keyword will act a practical layer to the actual motivations and provide an extremely insightful buyer persona. It's amazing, but there's 3 billion searches every day, and 20% of those are new every day. I just think that's a staggering fact. And you know, you can't make sense of that unless you use an online listening tool, and there's a lot of them about. We use one called Answer the Public, and there's a free version that you can use. And what it does, it just listens to auto-complete data from search engines like Google, and then puts out all the useful phrases. So you might type in your keyword that's important to your business, and then it'll tell you all the different phrases and questions that people are asking around your keyword. And that's a real goldmine for consumer insight, and it can help you create a real fresh and really great content around your products and the services that you offer. SEO, as I said right up front, is a real minefield of technology and tools, and we're all familiar with the concept, but it's really important that we engage a specialist, because I can't do that by myself. You probably can't do that by yourself. And there's some great specialists, particularly within the Fresh network, who can help us, and we partner with them all the time. When we do that, we can bring real insight to our buyer persona. But it's a critical element. The other part just to finish off this part is there are other behavioural data sources, like scan data. You might have retailers that can offer you scan data, so they can tell you when and where buyers are purchasing. There might be e-commerce transactional data, or even programmatic advertising data, which is matched up with third-party data sources. So these are all really good sources to paint a picture of your perfect buyer persona. Good on.
Thanks. Okay, so done a lot. Been through a fair bit, what questions to ask, what research techniques, how SEO can be one of those behavioural data sources. Now we're going to get a little bit more practical about what we're doing. And seeing this as a Fresh webinar, we're actually going to use some of the work that we've done for Fresh networking ourselves in recent times. So here's a matrix. So hopefully you can see that matrix on the screen in front of you. And here's an example we've applied to Fresh networking. On the y-axis, we've got, and think about this in your brand, but this is done for Fresh. How attractive is a particular audience? So dotted on the slide, you'll see different audiences. Some solopreneurs, small business owners. They might be all sorts of different classes of people that Fresh could possibly appeal to. Like, there's lots of them. But what we're trying to get here is the most important customer to Fresh. So on that Y matrix, we've got how attractive is that audience to Fresh? And on the X axis, we've got what's the ability for Fresh, the capability of Fresh to deliver that. So obviously, the higher the capability to deliver and the more numerous they are, the more attractive they are, they're going to fit in that top right-hand quadrant. And that's a way of sorting out the wheat from the chaff, if you like, of the audiences that you're going to be going after. So in this case, for Fresh, our chosen audience to go after was small business owners or directors who have been in business for 1 to 3 years. It wasn't the solopreneurs who just were in a slight state of panic, but who had sort of been through a little bit of that growing pain and now were looking to grow their businesses. Then what we did was we really just popped up, there's a whole range of different people, but we put a face to it, so we called him Bob the business owner. And in Bob the business owner, you can see down the right-hand side, there's the demographics, the psychographics, and the attitudinal things that make Bob up. So Bob was a small business owner, and he had a number of different, I think he was a can-do kind of guy. He actually wanted to make a difference. He was a more generous and a giving kind of person. He wasn't a mean-spirited, he was a generous spirit. And that's really important because understanding some of those things helps us when we come to write communications, will help you when you come to write communications for your business. What kind of person do you want to attract to your business? What's the best type of person that's going to resonate with the kind of content and imagery that your business serves up? So the better you know your Bob, the better you're able to serve them. But then we dug a bit deeper than that. So we've got our most important customer, Bob. Then we smash Bob in the middle of a chart like this one that we've got on the screen. I'm not going to go through it in major detail, but it's made up of broadly 4 quadrants. What is Bob thinking and feeling at the moment? What's he seeing? What's he hearing? What's he doing in his life? What are the things going on that make up Bob's life? You don't have to go down every little angle and every little mile, but what you do have to do is you get a cross-functional team together, and this is exactly what we did with Fresh, and possibly what you could do in your businesses. Get people who you trust. In Fresh, we got Fresh members, we got ourselves, and of course, the business owner, Darren, got us together in a room and we asked these kind of questions. We took off our own hats as business owners or marketers or construction, whatever business we were in. We took off our own hats and we put on the hat of Bob. And we asked ourselves, what is Bob thinking, feeling, doing, knowing? And so we did that exercise, and then we asked these really 2 important questions. We sort of summarise it. What are the pain and gain points for Bob that we, as Fresh Networking, can solve? And so you'll see those pain and gain points listed on the slide there. And we brought that together into a persona. So this is kind of a bit of a hero. This is where a lot of that work comes together. So in that research that I just mentioned earlier, as well, I probably should have mentioned, that's where you can table the research that we've been talking about. If you've got third-party research, if you've got your primary research, if you've got some insights from SEO that David talked about, because that's really good to inform what we just did. But now you want to bring it together in a persona. And this persona is a painted picture of this fictitious character, but this is your most important customer brought to life. So when you're employing new staff, you say, this is our value proposition of our business, and here is the customer that we're going with. This is who they are. This is what they want. These are the things that the needs and the pains that we're going to solve for this person. It's really important. This should be on the front desk of any salespeople in your organisation. The owners of the business should know who Bob is. And as I say, new employees should know who Bob is. So you bring it together, stick it up in your office, and make this really part of your customer-centric organisation. And you're really making a point of putting your customer first.
So I guess the question is now, we have our buyer persona, how do we inform our marketing? And the first step really is to look at the buyer's journey, or the customer journey you may be familiar with. The buyer's journey is really that awareness stage to consideration stage to final decision stage. For Bob, the need might emanate from just the sheer fact that he needs to grow his business. What does he do? What does he become aware of? He then kind of considers lots of different alternatives. He might be considering advertising, he might be considering networking, but he's starting to assess those needs. And then he goes through a consideration stage. He might talk to people, he might actually go along to a networking function. And at some point, he's going to make a decision. And then during that decision stage, he might talk to the facilitators of Fresh. He might actually run some trials and that type of thing. But this is a journey that is got to be supported by content along the way. It's important to understand that there is content helping Bob through his awareness consideration stage and his decision stage. So what we did is we start obviously with the customer, and we designed the content purely for Bob across those stages. So so what we've done here is we've brainstormed a whole range of what we call pillars, and these pillars are broad topics. So they're not really keywords, they're broad topics, and you can see there one of them is success stories. So what we wanted to show in that pillar was how success stories could be married up with a solvable challenge with our goal and a content theme, and we can populate that with many, many subtopics. But you can see there, when you do this work, you've got enough pillars to kind of cover a full year of content. You know, it's not going to take 2 months, 1 month. There's a lot of work, time and effort that's going to be employed across many months populating all of that content out. And just look how many subtopics we came up for that pillar, or that, you know, for this topic cluster. All have got great relevance and they work well together in a hero pillar. So to the side, to the left, is a visual representation what a topic cluster looks like, with the subtopics linked to the pillar page. And for Fresh, this is still a work in progress, but I wanted to share with you just a few examples of what we've done to date.
I've got a question. Why did you choose, like there's a number of different pillar topics that you had. Why did you choose success stories amongst some of the other pillars that you talked about?
Well, we had the challenge of acquisition versus retention. And at the time, it's interesting, COVID-19 was just coming into our world. And we identified that retention was going to be a primary task during this kind of new economic kind of world that we're living in. So having success stories is a great way to show existing members that, you know, it just reinforces that value that Fresh can provide in terms of getting referrals, making connections, you know, having fun while you're doing it all.
Yeah, good, thank you.
So we started with creating a category page on the blog for success stories, where we created 5 initial success stories, and each of those success stories had a blog and a video, a long form video, but plus we also cut those videos down for social media, and we promoted that content extensively via email and LinkedIn ads as well. So this has been a great success for Fresh. It's still early days, but we really have put Bob at the centre of all of the content, and for those success stories, we're able to show existing members, of whom we have a lot of Bobs, and it's worked very well from that point of view.
4 things that we talked through. First, putting your buyer persona at the centre of your business is crucial in today's world because it's changing so much. You've got to put them at the centre. The second thing we went through is illustrated a few ways that you can gather qualitative and quantitative ways. You do it on a budget, you do it with a big budget, but there's a number of different really important questions that you need to answer to be at the very heart of that. Then we walked through some practical ways, those matrices, the empathy map that we showed, some really practical ways to uncover your most important customer and then bring them to life and use them, pin them up in your business. And the last thing that David just took us through is like, so what? So we've got our persona, what's the point? Well, the point is that it comes to life. It comes to life with great videos, with great content, with stories and success stories, and that can talk about your business and your brand and inform your customer personas with the information, not what you want to talk about, but what they want to hear and what's of value to them. So we've shown you how that kind of can work. And those kinds of things can work in your business, but it may be slightly different things that work in your business. There's things that the persona finds helpful and useful may be really different for you. And that will uncover, that will come out of the collective wisdom and the thinking of some of those cross-functional teams and getting really good people around you to uncover it. So I really hope you've enjoyed today. Of course, we'd love to open it up to questions that you might want to dig a little bit deeper about, and we'll do our best to answer them.
I think, guys, I'd like to just make a comment, if you go back to the buyer's persona, is that it's not just about, I know when you created Bob, it's like, oh, but what about all the other customers that we could be losing? And it wasn't for that purpose. It's like, you know, you're always going to attract different audiences, but the terms of your marketing strategy, is like, who is the ideal client that you want in your business?
Mm.
And I think that's where I've got clarity as a result of doing that, in terms of, okay, even when I talk to my facilitators, it's like, okay, do they fit this persona? Because that will make a great member for you to have in your group. So you're always going to have other people that will join you on your journey, but yeah, just knowing who you're targeting is a great thing. So.
Yeah, I think it gives you laser-like focus on if you're writing about your customer, you're writing to your customer, if you're producing any form of content, and even how your salespeople, like Gordon said, you know, like critically, you know, like they will come across lots of different people, but it helps bring them back to a common message rather than, you know, reinventing the wheel, and it reinforces your value proposition as well. Oftentimes when you do this buyer persona research, it helps you refine your value proposition, and that's a great value as well.
I'd also probably like to add that it comes down to one. The idea is to try and distill it to one if you can, because we're all busy people, and you can't just, if you go chasing your tail about what about these guys, what about those guys, and having something for everyone, you'll be nothing to anyone. So it just helps you get that singularity amongst everyone.
And oftentimes you have a different buyer persona for different channels. So if you have a multi-channel business where, you know, you might have a retail element to it or an online element and so forth, often then you might develop different personas for those channels.
Yeah. Thanks, Darren, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.